A senior is found beaten to death with overkill.
But the violence that occurred to Lucille stood out. It was a severe beating.
If she has no enemies, why does this murder look personal? A relative seems to hold a grudge.
Could Lucille have been murdered by a family member in cold blood over money?
And a serial killer is on the loose. But no one knows why this heinous crime has happened.
You start going over everything again, and what have I missed? What have I misinterpreted?
2 decades later, a hot tip warms a cold case. Now it's game on to catch a killer.
It was eye-opening that someone would do something like this. It shocks you.
The unsolved ones, we have to stand up
and approach these cases in a way outside the box.
Let the world know, those out there that did commit a murder, there are people that are coming after you.
There's just a lot of good people trying to do the right thing.
Because it's something that you have to be passionate about.
Solve this. Bring some peace to the family, at least. Just doing my job.
It's a very cold day in Holiday, a suburb of Salt Lake City, and known as one of the most safe and sought-after places in Utah to live. When Shirley England is unable to reach her very active and community-oriented mother, Lucille Johnson, she drops into her home to say hello.
Her mom's a very busy senior. It's more common than not that Lucille Johnson will be very far from her phone. But Shirley England sees very quickly that something's wrong.
Lucille is lying at the end of the main floor hallway in a pool of blood. A pillow over her face. Blood splattered around her head.
England's first thought is that her mother has been hemorrhaging and holding the pillow to her face to absorb the blood. And on her way to the bathroom, she passes out.
She calls 911, and they suggest CPR, but it's clear to Shirley that her mother is dead. But when she tells the operator there is a pillow over her mother's face, Shirley England is shocked when the operator asks, "Are you alone in the house?"
That's when she knows that her mother has been murdered and she could be alone with the killer.
The operator immediately dispatches police to the crime scene.
I was off and got a call that there was a dead body and looked suspicious.
Patrol officers have already cleared the house. When lead detective Manny Lassick arrives,
I was the first homicide detective on scene. The patrol officers, initially took me through and showed me what they had seen.
Lucille Johnson lays in a pool of blood at the end of the hall with her head against the base of a door.
There wasn't a whole lot of ransacking that I could see, but the violence that occurred to Lucille stood out. There was a pillow over her face.
The scene is quite unusual for a neighborhood where normally a very petite senior should have been living in safety.
Fairly quiet street, decent-sized lots with nice homes in the neighborhood, an upscale neighborhood.
Lucille Minor is born in 1912 in Eureka, Utah. Kind, loving, and accomplished, she is a graduate of the Latter-day Saints Business College and a former member of the Salt Lake Exchange Club. Lucille is active in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, president of the Utah Broadcasting Association, and president of the Investment Center. She marries Howard Johnson in 1933, and they are together for almost 56 years before he passes away in 1989. Lucille Johnson is independent, and after her husband's death, continues to live in the same house where they raise their children. She keeps in close contact with their children, Shirley England and Jerry Johnson. In the summer months, Lucille is up by 6 a.m., working in her garden. She spends her days caring for elderly neighbors or anyone else in need. Her grandchildren take a high priority. She keeps toys stored in the house for when they visit.
Lucille Johnson is healthy. She still drives. She runs all her own errands. She shares an interest in genealogy with a nephew, and they work on family projects together. He spends a lot of time in the family home, and Lucille has helped him financially for several years.
But the week before her murder, Lucille tells him she is tired of constantly being expected to contribute financially, and she is going to start cutting back on support.
The day of the murder, a report is broadcast on the local news. Lucille's son, Jerry Johnson, hears his mother's address announced on the radio, but doesn't hear why. At the murder scene, police collect the pillow that was over the victim's face.
Lucille is wearing a red shirt covered with blood, and her body is laying face up. There's blood spatter on the walls and door. She fought for her life.
The height of the blood splatter indicates the victim is on the ground when she is savagely beaten. Near the front door and across the living room, Lego bricks are scattered. Shirley, Lucille's daughter, waves a red flag to police.
She said, no, that'd be out of order. If somebody came over to play, those blocks would be put away, you know. If they didn't put them away, she would put them away. She gave me some history of her mom, how she was a real meticulous housekeeper. She kept her house real neat, clean.
The scene appears to be a robbery gone bad. There are items missing: a high-end purse, some rings, and a necklace. However, there's other valuable items left behind, like a wallet and another necklace. So it's not obviously clear what happened here.
The only clues detectives have are the blood-soaked pillowcase and the pieces of Lego that are indicated out of place by the daughter.
We gathered the Lego blocks that were in the front room, went through, documented, you know, the scene where there was some blood spatter on the walls, down at the end of the hallway, pillow, anything that would stand out as far as evidence-wise. We were there to document and gather.
There's not a lot to go on at this time. It's a very sparse scene. And interestingly, there's no sign of forced entry. Lucille clearly opens the door willingly to someone.
You had your front door, and then you had a storm door that went on it. It had a latch on it, and she would keep that locked, and there were some Lego blocks out in the driveway. We gathered those.
Detective Lasik asks Lucille's daughter if a smooth talker could have persuaded Lucille to open the door. But Shirley is adamant that her mother would have never allowed a stranger into her house. There doesn't seem to be a reason for this, but authorities know something the general public does not. In Utah, there appears to be a serial killer on the loose, and he targets elderly women who live alone.
An active senior citizen is brutally murdered in her own home. Only a few items are missing, and the only thing out of place are a few of her grandchildren's Lego pieces strewn on the floor. But police know that a serial killer who targets elderly women in their homes is on the loose. Lucille Johnson is the 9th elderly woman to be murdered in Salt Lake City over a 10-year span. Between 1982 and 1991, 9 women over the age of 69 are found murdered in their homes.
And police don't know who's doing it, but they do suspect that Lucille could be part of a pattern.
Authorities traced Lucille Johnson's activities that day for clues of what might have happened, and and who might have crossed her path. The day of Lucille's murder, she is typically active in service of others. She visits the Senior Citizens Center, she shops for groceries, and drops off food for a neighbor in need.
At the end of her busy day, she's having problems with her vehicle, so she takes it in for servicing.
She has to leave her car, so an employee from the dealership drops her off at home.
Lucille is last observed alive in the afternoon. A neighbor sees her sweeping the exterior porch of her house.
Shirley intends to come over to Lucille's with a pizza after work, but she's too tired and puts it off to the next day. Her daughter never worries about Lucille, her very capable mother, being left alone.
The victim sustains a vicious attack. There are 24 rib fractures, and her sternum is broken.
There was a lot of beating to the head, chest. There was a bloody footprint on her chest, where she was stomped on the chest. And when we got her up to the medical examiner's office, she died from blunt force trauma, just a severe beating.
There are injuries on the front, back, and side of her head. 2 of the lacerations on the head penetrate the skull. Those injuries suggest the use of a bat or a stick.
The killing is excessively brutal given Lucille's petite size and advanced age. This degree of violence suggests anger and revenge. This killing looked personal, and the autopsy made clear that the victim fights back.
Fingernail clippings are taken and preserved, in case Lucille managed to scratch her attacker.
Little old, single, widowed woman living by herself in that house, she's not going to be able to put up a whole lot of a fight.
Directly after Lucille's killing, daughter Shirley receives a strange and disturbing phone call from Lucille's nephew.
It's just a week earlier when Lucille tells the nephew that she's decreasing the financial support she's giving him. Now, in the wake of the brutal murder, he's even refusing to offer condolences.
The nephew makes a comment that's shockingly cold and displays a frightening lack of empathy.
I have my own feelings to deal with, but there are things in that house that belong to me, and I want to be there when you clean it out.
Shirley is reminded that there is, in fact, one person who had a problem with Lucille. As the story spreads, family and friends are growing increasingly suspicious of the nephew. Could Lucille have been murdered by a family member in cold blood over money? At the funeral, Shirley is hoping that her suspicions are unfounded. She approaches the nephew, but she's very disappointed.
Even at the funeral, I kept thinking that it couldn't be. It couldn't be. I went over and tried to give him a hug, and it was like a block. Shirley, England.
Lucille's extended family grows suspicious of the nephew based on his odd behavior. Investigators agree. The nephew becomes a person of interest.
Lucille Johnson is laid to rest at a memorial park in East Mill Creek, Utah. And her nephew is taken by police to be interviewed.
I came at him hard. It's not, well, did you do it? Do you want to tell me about it? You come after him and you go hard with him and you push. He gave us his alibis. You run every one of those down. Every sentence that he gave you, as far as what I was doing that night, where I was, who I was with,
Police compare his footwear size to the bloody shoe print found on Lucille's torso. It's not a match, and his alibi checks out. The nephew is cleared off the suspect list.
By the middle of the next year, police have followed all leads to no avail. And despite a possible serial killer on the loose, police still don't have a solid suspect for this murder.
There's frustration. You start going over everything again, and you got your crime scene photos, you're looking at them all. You're examining each picture again, looking to see what is there. What did you miss something? What have I missed? What have I misinterpreted?
This ferocious killing of a vulnerable senior goes on the shelf. Lucille Johnson's case goes cold.
And then you box up everything that you've got. It gets put into archives. Yeah, it's a little bit personal. If I didn't do everything I could possibly do, and there's this evil person out there preying on somebody else, that's a tough pill to swallow.
Detectives have no idea they've laid the perfect groundwork. They just have to wait for the technology to catch up.
A well-loved senior citizen is murdered in a ferocious attack in her home. She appears to be the 9th in a string of serial murders of elderly women. But when no suspects are unearthed, her case goes into cold case storage.
Although Lucille's case is stalled, the investigation into the deaths of female seniors continues. And within a few years, it looks like there may be reason to reopen her case.
Salt Lake City is an idyllic community, surrounded by natural beauty with a strong central church. A relatively small population, it's a peaceful area that is low on unemployment and crime.
Utah has a dark past. The state is ranked 9th in the U.S. for the largest number of documented serial killer victims.
In the 1970s, while a law student at the University of Utah, Ted Bundy goes on a murder spree of women and eventually stands trial for kidnapping and murder. Arthur Gary Bishop is born and raised in Salt Lake City, a high school honors student and member of the Church of Latter-day Saints. He confesses to the murder of 5 young boys and is put to death by lethal injection in Utah in 1988. Gary Ridgway, born in Utah, is known as the Green River Killer. He preys on vulnerable women and is the 2nd most prolific serial killer in the U.S.
Over the span of a decade, Utah police see a pattern in the murders of elderly women in Salt Lake City.
So there was multiple cases that were looked at that time of elderly women that had been murdered.
Daniel Troyer is 20 years old when he attempts to rape a 71-year-old paraplegic woman in 1979. He is swiftly in custody again for burglary and in prison until the summer of 1985. Weeks later, 83-year-old Drusilla Ovard of Salt Lake City is brutally beaten, strangled, and bludgeoned to death.
Detectives believe that the killer hurts his right hand in the attack, so they distribute a bulletin to patrol officers about a potential daytime burglar with an injured right hand. Soon after, officers catch a man with a bandaged right hand breaking into homes just blocks from the murder scene. His name is Daniel Troyer.
Police strongly suspect Troyer is involved in the death of Ovard and her 69-year-old neighbor, Thelma Blodgett, who was murdered 6 days earlier, but they can't prove it.
This time, Daniel Troyer is sentenced to 15 years for burglary. but is paroled again in 1988 and released to a halfway house. Troyer applies for Barber College. Shortly after, Ethel Lacow, who lives very close to the school, is killed.
Witnesses report seeing Troyer near Lacow's home, just 2 days before she is murdered.
Police compare pubic hair found on Lacow's body, and it matches to Troyer.
In 1989, he is charged with Ethel Lacow's murder. However, 2 years later, the judge rules that certain evidence is inadmissible and gets thrown out. The district attorney appeals.
In 1996, the Utah Supreme Court rules in favor of the DA, and Troyer is recharged with capital murder. In 1998, DNA testing is done from the Drusilla Overt crime scene, and Troyer's DNA is a match, so he is finally charged with her murder as well.
In June 1999, Troyer agrees to a plea deal. He pleads guilty to the murders of Lacow and Ovard so that he can receive a life without parole sentence as opposed to the death sentence. Authorities believe he has killed others, but there's not enough evidence to prove it.
Troyer looks like the kind of killer that would target Lucille Johnson.
But police discover that Daniel Troyer is in prison at the time Lucille was killed. He did not kill Lucille. And with Troyer eliminated as a suspect, the case goes cold until 20 years later.
Police receive a tip from a nephew of a man named John Sansing regarding a murder in 1991. The nephew states he hears on more than one occasion Sansing arguing with his wife, Kara Sansing. She threatens to tell police about an elderly woman he admits to killing in Utah in 1991.
In 2013, detectives with Utah's Unified Police Department in the Greater Salt Lake area look for cases that match this tip, and subsequently look at the Lucille Johnson case.
In 2013, I was assigned to our violent crimes unit, and part of my responsibilities in that unit was to investigate current homicides as well as past homicides, cold cases.
In that same year, the U.S. Department of Justice provides a $300,000 cold case grant. It is for cases that can potentially benefit from the advances in modern forensic DNA technology.
When DNA first came out, it was very, very expensive, time-consuming. You could go months before you had any results. And this particular grant that we had at the time was focused on DNA. And as I reviewed the case, I believe there was good evidence in this case that we could test for DNA. Tests that weren't available in 1991 or even in the late 90s for detectives to use.
Sergeant Mike Ikiyamashiro, known as Sergeant Mike Ike, oversees the decision of what pieces of evidence will be used for DNA testing.
I looked at the clothing, I looked at photos, I looked at items of evidence collected from the autopsy, and as I searched through that, I made some decisions.
Sergeant Ike hopes that the killer's DNA is embedded within the fibers of the pillow, depending on how forcefully it was pressed down to Lucille's face.
I identified some of the items, clothing, a pillowcase, and I submitted several articles of evidence. And in this case specifically, the fingernails that were collected at the time of autopsy.
And if Lucille fought her killer, as police believe she did, there could be DNA under her fingernails.
And CODIS returns a hit. John Sansing. Sergeant Ike is able to tell Detective Lassick, who is one of the first on the scene in 1991, that he's found a DNA hit for Lucille Johnson's killer.
I let him know about the CODIS hit, the identification, the process that we'd be going through. And from a detective that had that case in the 90s, the only thing you could genuinely see in his eyes is that he was glad. I think that's another great trait of good detectives. There's no pride. There was no resentment. He was just genuinely glad.
John Sansing has a record of arrests that put his DNA on file. In fact, he sits on death row in an Arizona prison for a rape and murder in 1998. But Sergeant Iki Yamashiro doesn't have enough to convict him in the Lucille Johnson case yet.
Although his DNA is found under her fingernails, it could be there innocently. Police need to investigate how Sansing crossed paths with Lucille because they're going to need more if they want to convict him.
Sergeant Iki Yamashiro speaks to Sansing's wife Kara, who's presently in prison herself. She reports that John Sansing worked in Salt Lake City County at a car dealership in 1998. Lucille takes her car in to be serviced on the day she is killed and is given a ride home by someone at the dealership.
The suspect, part of his job responsibilities was to shuttle people back while their vehicle was being serviced. So he had the opportunity to see where she lived, talk with her a little bit, and then returned later in the evening when this attack occurred.
Still, this could be argued as circumstantial and isn't enough to seal the case. Sergeant Ike goes to Arizona to interview John Sansing and investigate the shocking killing that lands John Sansing on death row in an Arizona prison.
Most repeat murders have patterns, and these are details that Sergeant Ike may be able to use to prove beyond any doubt that Sansing murdered Lucille Johnson.
Everything is riding on this interview.
This was a unique interview because of the security issues, the status that he was under. It was a crowded room with a lot of security measures in place. So it was very tense from the very beginning.
A serial killer of seniors is ruled out in Lucille Johnson's 1991 murder. Evidence from the 20-year-old murder is sent for testing, and the DNA search reveals a suspect. But DNA is not enough. Investigators travel to interview the suspect, who sits on death row for an unrelated rape and murder.
When Sergeant Ike interviews John Sansing, he doesn't mention a specific case, but that he wants to know the man's background history. Sansing talks. He unwittingly places himself in Salt Lake City at the time of the killing. This is the corroboration that police need.
And the case that landed Sansing on death row offers Sergeant Ike Yamashiro dark new insights.
31-year-old father of 4, John Sansing, is high on crack cocaine. He and his wife, Kara, need more drugs, but they are broke. They decide to rob someone for their valuables.
They also need to feed their 4 children. So John Sansing comes up with a plan. He calls Living Springs Church near Glendale and arranges for a charitable food delivery. He'll get food and rob the delivery person.
At approximately 5 p.m., 41-year-old Trudy Calabrese arrives at the Sansing home with a box of food. She chats with the couple, and as she attempts to leave, she's attacked by Sansing.
The Sansing children are present. They testify that Judy Calabrese begs them to call police, cries that she doesn't want to die. Sansing beats her unconscious with a club as she pleads and prays. He binds her limbs and, with help from his wife Kara, drags her into a bedroom.
Sansing orders his children to watch television in another room, but they overhear events.
At that point, he rapes, tortures, and murders Trudy Calabrese, then steals her jewelry. Afterwards, he looks out the dining room window to make certain that no one has seen anything.
Each of the 4 children see Calabrese's dead body. Sansing, ineffectually, tries to hide the body behind a shed in the backyard. He covers the body with a pile of clothing. But the next day, searchers find Miss Calabrese's truck in a parking lot near the Sansing home.
Inside, there's a piece of paper with the Sansing address. When authorities come looking for her at the Sansing residence, they easily locate her body behind the shed. Sansing, who is driven to his sister's house, admits to her that he and Kara killed Trudy Calabrese. Eventually, John Sansing's father telephones police and reports his son's location. John Sansing knows the police are coming. He does not attempt to flee and submits to custody.
Sansing is charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, sexual assault, and armed robbery. His wife, Kara, is also charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping.
John and Kara Sansing plead guilty to first-degree murder charges.
Kara Sansing claims that she didn't see all of the murder, and she didn't say anything because she was a battered woman under John Sansing. Kara Sansing is sentenced to 25 years, and John Sansing receives the death penalty.
Sansing expresses a desire for their children, who are now in foster care, to get a permanent placement and to go to church.
The similarities between the 1998 murder of Trudy Calabrese and the 1991 murder of Lucille Johnson cannot be denied. Both female victims were bludgeoned, strangled, and had their jewelry stolen, making robbery the likely motivation for the attacks. But it's still not enough to prove anything. Sergeant Ike makes a connection after finding out Sansing's children were present for the Calabrese murder.
Sergeant Mike Ikemashiro sends the Legos that were found strewn in the living room in for latent fingerprint testing analysis.
It was the one thing that seemed oddly out of place on the day of the murder. Lucille was too neat and tidy to leave toys lying around.
Small fingerprints are found on Lego pieces. Now, these could belong to the grandchildren of Lucille Johnson, but Sergeant Ike has a long-shot idea.
I actually met with Kelsey Vale, one of the latent examiners at the state lab, and talked to her about the potential of finding fingerprints of a child, but then comparing them to fingerprints of an adult. They're just smaller prints, but the ridge detail is going to be the same. They're just going to be larger.
Kids Lego could make or break this case. Sergeant Ike tracks down Sansing's children. They're now adults in their 20s, but fingerprints never change.
Myself and my partner that went with me, we actually carried around at the time a portable fingerprint station. So ink pads, rollers, fingerprint cards, and as we interviewed the children, we asked them if they would provide us with a sample of their fingerprints. Obviously at that time, I wasn't disclosing information as to what I was specifically looking for other than trying to find some comparisons to this case.
Police matched the prints of Sansing's son, who was 5 at the time, on Lego bricks found at Lucille's home. He was there at the time she was killed.
Maybe I was a little naive, but there are people in the world that will bring family along to commit crimes, and it's a tough one.
When you hear the details of this particular case, you can see that this individual is barely human. Salt Lake County Sheriff Jim Winder. A DNA match is made on the cold case murder of Lucille Johnson. But it turns out that the suspect connected is already in prison.
John Sansing already sits on death row for the brutal rape and killing of Trudy Calabrese. But because of DNA and of fingerprints found on Lego at the crime scene, he is charged with murder of a second woman, Lucille Johnson.
John Sansing goes into overkill to torture and prey upon the weak and vulnerable. What happened to him to make him this way?
John Sansing grows up in a broken home in Alabama. He is a thief and a drug addict, and his mother can't keep him out of juvenile detention. In 1984, she is fed up with his behavior and sends him to his father in Utah. Sansing has little to do with his biological father there, and he doesn't complete high school. He meets his wife Kara at a Salt Lake City mall. Kara Sansing runs away from an abusive home in Bangladesh as a child and winds up in a Calcutta jail. She is adopted from India in her teens, and her adoptive mother describes her as a very tough youth who is negatively impacted by the harsh conditions that she escapes.
Their relationship is volatile, with both using drugs. John beats Kara regularly. They have 4 children together, none of whom are spared their worst behavior. One mystery that remains about the night of the murder is how Sansing gained entry into the home. Lucille's daughter is sure her mother would never open the door to a stranger. It's now suspected that Sansing uses his own 5-year-old son as a decoy. For whatever reason Sansing gave Lucille, she likely relented out of her inherent kindness towards children.
It's speculative as to whether the child was a ruse that was used, but it's certainly a possibility. Lieutenant Justin Hoyle.
And while Sansing kills Lucille, it appears he leaves his 5-year-old son to play with the Lego pieces she's saved for her grandchildren.
In 1993, 2 years after he murders Lucille Johnson and gets away with it, Sansing pleads guilty to attempted aggravated assault, a Class A misdemeanor, in a separate case. 2 years later, in 1995, Sansing moves to Arizona. It is there in 1998 that he murders Trudy Calabrese and is swiftly apprehended and sentenced to death. Over 20 years later, John Sansing's son confirms he recalls being with his father in Lucille Johnson's home on the night of February 1st, and says he has been traumatized since the murder took place.
I do feel bad for his kids, the things that have occurred by his father and things that he's witnessed. In talking with him and looking at his history, there's been quite a bit of substance abuse, and obviously that takes a toll on people.
A subsequent interview with Kara Sansing confirms her husband admits to her around the time of the murder that he kills an elderly woman in Holiday.
There was things that I believe she was being completely truthful about. I believe there was things that she was probably trying to hide or minimize, her role.
Sansing is formally charged with the murder of Lucille Johnson in 2014. Despite Sansing already being on death row, Detective Akimir Shiro affirms.
It's very important that we prosecute this case for the family. Detective Mike Ikiyamashiro.
It's important knowledge for the officers who dedicate themselves to the pursuit of justice.
There's no way you can't take it home at night. The facts are what that physical evidence tells you. Someone bludgeoned this woman to death in her home for no good reason. That motivates you as a detective to find out not only who did this, but to ensure that you build a case that brings justice to the decedent and to their family.
"47-year-old Sansing pleads guilty to the murder of Lucille Johnson. He receives an additional sentence of life in prison and sits on death row in Arizona.
There's no other word I can think of other than a monster. No regard for his children, no regard for the victim, just trying to fuel that drug addiction. I don't know what normal person would do something like that other than a monster.
It turns out to be a monumental turning point piece of evidence that 20 years earlier, detectives chose to bag a few seemingly random pieces of Lego.
If there's something there in the scene that is standing out that isn't normal or whatever, you take it. Is it evidence? I don't know. You don't take it, you'll never know. Had I not taken the Lego blocks, there's possibility this would never have been solved.
Through a federal grant designed for cold cases, Lego evidence revived this investigation, and Lucille Johnson's killer is now known.
Lucille's son, Jerry Johnson, remembers the day he heard on the radio his mother's address, but didn't connect it with a murder. He says he remembers then hearing a voice say to him, "She's with me."
I just had a very peaceful feeling come over me. That peace has been with me ever since. Jerry Johnson.
Jerry Johnson says that he and his siblings are relieved to learn that Lucille was not killed by someone she knew.
I think forgiveness is what closure is. I think we already have forgiven Sansing. Jerry Johnson.
But Shirley England says discovering her mother dead in 1991 has caused her ongoing trauma that will probably never end. She's grateful to police for what they did for her, but she doesn't think she'll ever find true closure.
Did we give them closure? I don't know if that was there for them, but I feel good about that as an organization. We did everything we could for that family.
Whether it takes a few short years or decades, DNA evidence can expose the guilty and bring them to justice.
You commit a crime like this in this community, to our dying days, we are going to pursue you. We will hunt you down, and we will solve these crimes. Salt Lake County Sheriff Jim Winder.
This is one of the cases that brought a lot of fulfillment to me in my career because I was able to see how the case affected the family, how that gave them what they've been looking for over 20 years. That's what makes it worthwhile, and that's what motivates you.